the first thing is, well, I just want to know what your view is, because I've seen conflicting reports on your view on this based on my interaction and based on other people asking you some things. So one thing I want to know your view on is, what is your view of natural human herbivory with respect to getting adequate amounts of dietary vitamin B12?
I think the jury's still a little bit out. I think there's a lot of different sources that can add up. Like, I think you're right that a good source, although there are, like, this study I got wrong. There's another study showing higher, like in Mexican water somewhere, it's like significantly higher. It's like notable, like you can get.
And is it 5,6-dimethyl benzimidazole ligand B12, or is it just?
I mean, I haven't looked at the study in a year, but that was.
It makes a huge difference. So that was only one part of the problem. So one part of the problem is
whoever's jump master or whatever. Can you please ready up? Sorry, I don't know if it's Mike or Hammy. Sorry, my bad.
Steak tastes good.
So there's two main in any B12 concentration study, whether it's in water or whether it's in soil or whether it's in fecal matter or whether it's in any natural source. The two main issues that need to be checked are, number one, what's the actual concentration of B12, and number two, what percentage of the B12 has 5,6-dimethyl benzimidazole as the ligand. Because that is the B12 that we can actually use. And the other B12 that have other ligands are just pseudo B12. And you find that in a lot of these cases, whether in soil,
and that's what's in like seaweed and stuff, right?
Yeah, but it's not just in seaweed. It's 98% of the B12 in feces. It's so people one of the things people use to try to make the case of natural is eating feces sometimes, or eating with sanitation issues. But the issue is not only the concentration of B12 in fecal matter, it's also that 98% of that B12 is actually not usable. It's pseudo B12. It doesn't have the proper ligand. And the same thing ought to be checked in the water as well. So there's two issues that need to be checked off. So I'd actually like to see the other study with the concentration of B12 in the water. I'd like to also see if they checked for the what percentage of that had.
I can't watch anything.
Yeah, 1 second. That it's the study on the Tara Umara.
Hi, Lindy.
Yeah, Lindy's like, shut, Lindy. 1 second. I'm looking through it right now. I'm just trying to find. There's 28 mentions in this of B12. So. Yeah. Okay, Mexican cities, B12 content of 0.01 to 0.7 micrograms per liter has been reported in Mexican cities. Oh, unpublished data. Unpublished data. So good luck with that.
Wait. Hold on. What were the numbers?
I will send you the exact.
0.
I mean, it's not enough.
No, it's not. It doesn't sound like it's even. No, it doesn't sound like it's even remotely in the ballpark of being close. Not enough is an understatement.
Okay, that just I copied micrograms and it came out as peak.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It actually says micrograms in the study.
Even if it's micrograms, it's not even. It's not even remotely in the ballpark of being close. I mean, look at how many liters you would have to consume to get. I mean, the RDA is what? The lowest RDA I've seen is 2.3 micrograms a day.
Mike, ready up.
So just let's calculate how many liters you would have to consume of this. So, I mean, 2.3 even if we go with the upper limit, let's go with 0.07. Even if we give you the most charitable case, that means every day you would have to consume 32 liters of this water.
I mean, I still think the case that I was making is that it could come from a bunch of different. So if you drink a liter, is it really? 1 second, let me look at B12.
That's the upper limit. If we take the average, I mean, if we took the average of that, just with the numbers you're giving me,
1.8, 2.4 adults.
Yeah, it would come out to, if we take the average, it'll come out to over 50 liters of water you would have to drink of this just to meet your RDA. I mean, you get basically nothing of your RDA from it.
Yeah, and I'm saying that it's possible if that there are higher sources of water. Maybe there aren't, but if you get, maybe like 3 or 4% from that, and then if you're getting, I think the main source would probably not showering, not being hygienic, and getting like trace amounts of fecal matter and various.
Is there trace amounts of fecal matter wouldn't do it either. You'd actually have to eat pounds. You'd have to eat pounds of fecal matter, or at least quarter pounds of fecal matter, in order to get the RDA of B12. And the reason for that is because 98%. That also has a very generous assumption of no competition between the B12 that doesn't have that ligand and the B12 that does. So you would actually, it's not trace amount. Trace amounts wouldn't do anything for you for the RDA of B12. Hello,
I'm in like 5 conversations right now. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, I definitely have to see proof that the B12 in fecal matter is not actually usable.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because if we're looking at, I guess you could look at other digestive systems of herbivores and their B12. So, for example, where would a ruminant get it? So you're saying that in ruminants they're making B12 that's usable, but
they're also
human colon, there's not.
Yeah, in the human they don't. The issue is that the usable B12, there's an issue of usable B12 getting converted into non-usable B12, and that happens. That we know that happens at least we know it happens at some point. It certainly happens by the colon, because that's when it's shortly.
And
after
I definitely like to see proof of that.
Yeah. I can send that.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is with other ruminants. The other ruminants have capacity for B12 for a number of reasons. Because, first of all, I don't believe they only have, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe their only absorption avenue of B12 is the terminal ileum, which it is in humans. In humans, there's like one little area of the small intestine where B12 can be absorbed, and I don't think that's necessarily the case in ruminants. I don't think that's analogous.
I'm just wondering if they're able to absorb. Yeah, okay. So you're saying they're able to absorb usable B12 before it becomes unusable, in theory. Another one, which is a possibility that I've looked at, which I don't put a lot of stock in, but this study right here, which is, it's from the 80s, who really knows? But let me link it. That is vitamin B12 synthesis by human small intestinal bacteria. So this was them measuring people in India actually producing some in their small intestine. And my guess is it's actually a result of a little bit of like SIBO, because it's colonic bacteria making it into the small intestine, right?
Let me just read the study, because we only have an abstract.
Yeah, you can just search for the title and find it.
While he reads that, ready up.
Okay, yeah, but then I'm not going to be able to look up things.
Sorry, I'm a terrible person.
Human feces contain appreciable quantities of vitamin B12 or vitamin B12-like material. I like it how they said that, because they're saying vitamin B12 or vitamin B12-like material. So they're opening the possibility that this B12 is pseudo B12. So that I like. Presumably, it says presumably produced by bacteria. Fine, but this is unavailable to the non-coprophagic individual. However, the human small intestine also harbors considerable amount of microflora and is even more extensive in apparently the southern Indian subjects. We show that at least 2 groups of organisms, bowel, Pseudomonas yellow, may synthesize significant amounts of the vitamin. Yeah. So I would need to see how much of that is expected to actually get to the ileum, and yeah, that's what I would have to see. But I don't. Yeah, I haven't seen really. a case for that. But the biggest.
Let me hear. Here's another nature.
Well, here's the biggest. Sure. Here's the biggest issue is that it needs to be shown that this B12 is not pseudo B12. You need to separate this B12 from the pseudo B12. And from everything, from what I've read on this, and I can go because I actually looked at this very study today on my work computer, but I can look it up again. What I've seen, the data I've seen is that 98% of the B12 in fecal matter is actually just pseudo B12.
Yeah, but even if 98% of it is pseudo B12 and there's enough, if there's still
and there is, and I remember calculating this, and there would be enough if you ate a quarter pound of shit every day.
Okay, we'll send it to me. Here's my question for you then. What do you think? So you're just saying that humans weren't naturally herbivores, and that we were always getting some source of B12 through some type of animal product.
I think my position is that natural human herbivory is actually compatible.
So what about some of our ancestors that were like more or less considered to be entirely vegetarian? I don't want to get.
I don't think they were vegan. They were definitely not vegan. No, I don't think they were vegan. I think they ate insects. They ate worms. I think there are some.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever. I don't think there was ever a reason for any of our ancestors to not be eating insects, but.
And I do know that the insects there are insects that do contain B12.
There are, but how much does the average insect take, and then how are these?
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know exactly how much, but I do know that they had a dietary source of B12. They certainly did, and that it was not, and that on a vegan diet, I'm convinced. So would it be enough? I don't know, but what I am very confident of is without a dietary source of B12 at all, I don't actually believe that that's compatible with life, and I don't think a vegan diet naturally would give a sufficient quantity of dietary B12 in any practical way in a natural setting. And all the cases where I've seen to try to make this case, and I'm always really weirded out by why this case has been tried to be made. I'm weirded out by why vegans are so insistent that there could have been some way to naturally get this B12, and I know why they're doing it. I know why they want to have this, because there's some weird implication that there's this death blow or whatever to veganism if it can be shown that you couldn't do this naturally, and I think it's just so silly. Like, okay, so you can't do it naturally. Great, we're not in that situation. Do it not naturally.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me the argument. I mean, for me it's looking at why are these disease rates so lower? Why do people reverse various diseases, etc. Oh, it must be more or less natural. I don't have a problem with being like, yeah, we were 98 to 99% herbivorous, and there was some type of animal input that whether it was insects or something that did give B12. Like, I don't think that hurts it. I just look to it as why are we suited to this particular diet, and it makes no sense that we're eating animal products if we are, if our digestive tract hasn't evolved to be the right length, et cetera, et cetera.
Wait, what? Wait, hold on. If our digestive tract has evolved, what do you mean?
I'm talking about, for example, why we can't handle cholesterol, or just why have we not made anatomical adaptations to eating?
We're not the only ones who can't. We're not the only ones who can't handle cholesterol. I mean, cats. Yeah, with enough cholesterol, cats can't handle cholesterol.
Yeah, but I feel like that's one of. I mean, there's just so many.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the chart. We're going to have a lot to disagree on. I think actually half of the claims in that chart are actually just straight up false. That chart that compares makes these anatomical. I know you've made a video about this too.
Yeah, and a lot of people look at it and they get it wrong. I'm not saying you did this, but
I know the way that you think people get it wrong when they're looking at the when they look at. Are you talking about the case where they measure it from the pelvis instead of where they measure it from the total trunk length instead of the pelvis, or the total height instead of from the pelvis? Yeah. So I actually looked into that. I'm aware of your defense of that. And I still think that fails. So because when I actually looked at the comparative anatomy, I actually couldn't standardize it to any given metric. So for example, when I tried to line up carnivores and herbivores, and do it based on the pelvis. Do it based on just pelvis length to show a girdle length or something. I'm not aware of any data that does it consistently across humans and other animals, and I'm not able to.
I would say it's a general trend. I looked at a few.
No, I'm not. I'm not able to do that. Yeah, no, but I'm not able to do that and point humans in the herbivore category based on that. And I would like to see you do it if you can.
I mean, I looked up a few. I remember looking up, double checking. What was it? Rabbits, chimpanzees, lions. Yeah. Just a quick check.
The other thing is there's you also have to deal with countervalent aquatic mammalians who have these really, really long intestines, and they're completely.
And I think there's
carnivorous.
Exceptions. Like, for example, why do octopi have eyes on the side of their head? It's actually they're predators, but they're in a different environment. I think there's obviously exceptions, but within like land mammals. And
I would like to actually see even that, because I think when we're looking at humans and when we look at that standardized metric, and in fact I think I typed this out a long time ago. Let me just search real quick.
Because, I mean, when you're adding various things together, you're talking about teeth, you're talking about a lot of things that do vary a lot, like litter size, but we still fit as a general trend very much toward...
I'm not convinced of that, no. I think we actually don't. I think, like, when you look at things like... Okay, here we go. So, like, when you actually look at these different things, like pH of stomach acid, I think we don't fit into the herbivorous category. I think we actually fit into... we fit very well into the omnivorous category. Actually, we fit perfectly well into scavenger category. That scavenges both meat and actually, more specifically meat. They would usually. But okay. So here we go. So human GI length is 10 to 12, and I'll go with your correction too, because I know your correction. Human GI length is 10 to 12 times body length, similar to herbivores, not 4 to 6 times body length found in omnivores. So I know people pointed this out and later in the video, but what they pointed out was that the human GI tract length is around 30 feet in length compared to the average human height of 5.7, a ratio of 5.26. But now you pointed out that's trunk length. You want to use trunk length instead of body length.
Well, trunk length, it has to be. Otherwise, when you're talking leg length, all of a sudden, then
exactly, because they're walking on those legs. So if you want to use trunk length instead of body length, it needs to be consistent with animals too. But there's no citation for a standard using trunk length instead of body length across the board that I'm seeing in any of the data.
I mean, you measure a dog. Where are you measuring? I mean, you're measuring from their hips to their neck, right? You're not stretching their legs out and going, okay.
I'm not clear on that.
That reminds me of traumatic memories.
I'm not clear that that's the case. And you also we would have to include. You would have to account for it. You would just have to also account for all the aquatic mammals, like all the aquatic mammals that have these incredibly long intestines. And there's a huge litany of them. It's not like these one-off exceptions. There's just one aquatic mammal after another that's purely carnivorous that have these really long intestines. And I just don't see why.
I mean, I think we were talking about like trends within land animals in a ton of different metrics, and I don't think like some aquatic carnivores having longer digestive system is enough to just like completely cancel it.
Yeah, I mean, then I would just see. Yeah, I would like to see it shown with humans. The human GI tract compared to the trunk length, with the animal GI tract compared to the trunk length, and where humans fit in. And I would like to see the data that it's because body length and trunk length. Actually, I'm not going to take it prima facie to be the case that when they say body length versus trunk length in an animal, that they mean the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. And I will say, backing up, I do agree that it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not putting a lot of weight on this argument as an argument in general, but I still feel like I'm going to base my view of it off the data that I've seen. And so I'm not going to be convinced that, oh shit, sorry, we're getting shot at like a lot. It's really hard for me to focus. But No, sorry, I'm getting like naded right now. This is why I normally don't talk to people while playing this game. But basically, if my main motivation for saying that a vegan diet is healthier and that there's a major health aspect.
Well, we're not talking about health. We're talking about something irrelevant.
Then I back up to this based off my health position is okay. Why are these people on a plant-based diet so much healthier? Oh, maybe it's our anatomy.
This is the dangerous thing. This is the view that I find so dangerous when vegans go to. I so strongly, like, this triggers this thought process. I have to tell you, Mike, how much this triggers me. This thought process, I think, is one of the most dangerous things a vegan could go down. It has the implication that which we are not adapted to, that diet that which we are adapted to, somehow entails some sort of health outcomes that are beneficial.
Okay. I would say,
on average, gives you this great, or this better than average health outcome in some way that entails.
And so you're literally saying that somebody who's on a vegan diet isn't going to have a better than average health outcome.
No. That's not what I'm. No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, not at all. What I'm saying is that if they do have an on average health, higher than average health outcomes, then it is not in virtue of their vegan diet being something they're adapted to have. It is not necessarily in virtue of them being adapted to that diet. Being adapted to a diet does not entail having an average higher or better health outcome on that diet.
I mean, I would agree to that to an extent. Like, for example, you could have a better health outcome if you take an animal within their natural diet where they could actually still be missing nutrients within their natural diet and then giving them those nutrients. Mm-hmm. They would probably live longer and be healthier, but there's still a general trend of what have we consumed for hundreds of thousands, millions of years. How did that change how we deal with things like saturated fat, how we deal with various nutrients, and how, what causes inflammation, what doesn't cause inflammation, what, how antioxidants affect our body versus how they might affect a carnivore or something. And I think they all add up to say that there is a good reason, but I don't think it has to be an argument like, oh, you need to go vegan because it's what we naturally ate.
Yeah, and I just want to be very clear that the reason veganism can be healthy should not be linked up. I really, really want to stress this to anyone listening. The reason veganism is healthy should not be linked up to our evolutionary history. And I think it's so tenuous and so speculative, and the case is so weak. The best cases to make are just outcome-based metrics. To look at just, okay, we have our prospective cohorts, what ends up happening.
So why do you think these people are doing better?
Yeah.
Why do you think they're doing better? Biological, anatomical basis, or like history? No,
it's not that they don't have any basis for doing better. I just don't think it necessarily follows from the evolutionary history of the things that they have eaten previously. Not necessary. It could. It certainly could, but it's not necessary. So I can explain why they're doing better. So what I'd say not necessarily
very different than like something that should be a taboo to.
No. I'm not. Yeah, no. It's a taboo the taboo is that there's an implication that there's that necessary entailment. That's what is triggering. What triggers me is there seems to be this implication of a necessary entailment between that which we have adapted to eat in our evolutionary history and what results in a health outcome. And I think that is very, very cringy. And I hate it when vegans imply this. I hate it when vegans go there. Because it's such bullshit. It's completely wrong on so many
it's hard
levels.
to say. I mean, if you are having some dairy-based autoimmune reaction or literally a lactose intolerance, you have a health outcome that is based off you consuming lactose, which you have not naturally, your ancestors have not naturally consumed, and you have a problem. Like, that is just such a solid example.
That doesn't, no, sure, you can give a case where it is the case. Again, I'm not saying, what's cringy is not saying that there could be a case that is entailed from that. What's cringy is that trying to make that a general rule.
A prescription. You're saying making it a prescription. Well, I mean,
I feel
like at the very least it's saying you should have a choice to do this diet based off there being a pretty good case that we ate a lot of plants in history.
That's where I would that's where I would say that's very dangerous. I would say that is something.
So what do you think is going to happen? Like, you think people are going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to follow this sort of like appeal to nature veganism, and then I'm not going to reverse every disease ever. So
no, I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous because it's false. I think it's dangerous because it doesn't follow. Its truth is valuable in its own sake. I think it's dangerous because there's no general prescription that entails what we've naturally adapted to eat has some kind of connection with health outcome. I don't think the case has ever been made that there's this general trend like that. There are certainly cases where that's true, but it doesn't follow that. There are certainly cases where that's completely false as well. I mean, you would certainly grant that the lactose in the 20% of humans or 25% of humans or whatever that have 35%. The lactase, or even 35% that have the lactase persistence phenomenon. You would certainly grant that doesn't entail that milk is healthy for those people.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what I'm saying is that I haven't seen it shown that there is a general trend that which we have, and just to be clear, you would certainly agree that is an evolutionary adaptation to drinking milk. It's very hard to deny that.
Yeah, it's an evolutionary adaptation to including milk in the diet, but not necessarily that it will give you a healthy outcome that we've adapted to.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I mean,
some people have adapted to eating humans, or sorry, some people in Papua New Guinea.
Exactly. So I haven't. All I'm saying is I haven't been shown it to be the case that there is this general trend that which we've adapted to eat somehow entails a positive health outcome.
But I would also differentiate like late stage evolution, like we know that's within the last 10, like large anatomical features that have formed over hundreds of thousands.
I don't see the prescription for either. I don't think the case has been made for either.
And I don't
think a trend has been made for either. And if you think you can make the case for either, I would like to see it. I don't think you can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like playing a game.
No. I don't think you can with all the studies at the fingertips. I don't think you can if you weren't at the game.
Quickly,
I'd like to see it.
Make the case. Make the case. Not dying, please.
So I just want to. I feel like there's a couple. I guess we might as well just table this conversation because there's going to be things. I mean, like 5 or 6 different traits about the human body that I think are adapted at the most persuasive ones. That I can just throw together a few for another time. But you're welcome to. I think this was one of many things that you thought I was wrong about. So you're welcome to.
Yeah. Other things. TMAO. TMAO. I'm just going to just straight up. It doesn't cause heart disease. It's actually just the associations turn out to be a complete confounder when the Mendelian randomization studies have been run.
So what about the study where they gave people some choline supplements, vegans choline supplements, and their platelet aggregation went up and their TMAO levels went up?
Yeah, so that's platelet aggregation is a mechanistic speculation. It doesn't necessarily terminate in cardiovascular disease.
But so then why did it happen? You're saying
it happened?
It's okay.
Yeah, it happened.
It's okay that their platelet
okay.
aggregation went
No,
up.
what I'm saying is that it doesn't necessarily terminate in cardiovascular disease.
You're saying that might not necessarily
and it doesn't. Yeah.
Have a negative outcome by people having increased platelet aggregation.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. 100%.
So you're saying increased platelet aggregation doesn't actually increase risk?
Doesn't necessarily, depending on the degree and other factors.
So you're saying all these things
increased platelet aggregation. I want to be very clear. Increased platelet aggregation does not necessarily entail an increased risk of cardiovascular disease outcome. And when we actually run the data that actually looks and tries to answer that, which is what the Mendelian randomization studies do, they actually separate that out and actually say, okay, well, do they actually have, when they had biologically predicted higher levels of TMAO in their blood, did they actually end up having increased risk of cardiovascular disease? And the answer time and time again was no.
But do you have data showing large, groups of vegans, with higher versus lower levels of TMAO? Like if you were to randomize a group of vegans into a choline supplement group, which of course means they're going to produce TMAO, and one that doesn't, you can say with certainty that group of high choline vegans would not have an increased risk of heart disease.
I don't think
we're talking about standard American people.
So to answer, you've asked me a question. I'll answer your question. So you've asked me a question. Is there a randomized controlled trial that has been performed and has looked at cardiovascular outcomes? And to my best of my knowledge, the answer is I don't think a randomized controlled trial has been performed that has examined cardiovascular disease outcome. Now, the second best thing has been done, though. The second best thing is something called a Mendelian randomization study. A Mendelian randomization study would be second best. It would be superior to a prospective cohort study, but it would be inferior to a randomized controlled trial. And what the Mendelian randomization studies do end up showing is that when actually, you know what? Let me just get the study.
Okay, when you get it up, I was saying that to say that this study doesn't exist. We're looking at the studies that you're talking about are, I believe, on people who have a lot of risks for heart disease. They're
on both. They're the studies that are on massive population scales. They're going to include vegans. They're going to include vegetarians. They're going to include omnivores. They're going to include.
But I'm saying if you're going to make a recommendation for vegans, I just don't think you can sort of say that TMAO won't cause.
I'm saying no. I'm saying there's no evidence that it does. There's no evidence that TMAO causes heart disease.
But you still think that it could cause heart disease in vegans?
Look, anything could cause heart. No. I'm saying there's no evidence that it causes heart disease in vegans. There's no evidence that it doesn't
cause heart disease in vegans.
Okay, well, listen. Well, wait a minute. Then why are we? That could be true of anything. That could be true of apples. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that strawberries doesn't cause heart disease in vegans. There's no evidence that apples doesn't cause heart disease in vegans. If your standard is that there's no evidence, look. That's the whole point. You can't actually. We're not proving a null. Studies don't prove a null hypothesis.
We need to be cautious here, in that you shouldn't be saying that there's no risk of this when there potentially.
There's no evidence that there is. There's no evidence that there is a risk. I'm not saying that it's not possible that there is a risk. I'm just saying that based on the available data, there really is no evidence that a risk.
So do you like bottom of your heart believe if you were to take like 1 million vegans who had higher platelet aggregation from TMAO, from choline supplements, and 1 million vegans that didn't have that, you honestly think there would be no difference between these?
I believe that there would be no statistically significant difference. That's correct. Absolutely.
And that's where I just feel like
that's implicated by the Mendelian randomization studies that show that. And again, you're not going to be able to appeal to this difference between vegans and non-vegans because again, it's a Mendelian randomization study. The randomization occurred prior to birth. That's the whole point of a Mendelian randomization study. So all of these different factors are going to equalize out on both sides. And so when they look at the Mendelian randomization study and they see who has biologically higher levels of TMAO that are predicted by the single nucleotide polymorphism, which is the second best you're ever going to get to a randomized controlled trial, you see no difference whatsoever in cardiovascular disease outcome. It doesn't exist. You don't see it.
And I think, do you want to know my take on this and TMAO in general?
I will, but I just want to make it very clear. You're not going to be able to appeal to an excuse that, this was a general population who wasn't vegans, because whatever predicates you want to assign to the vegan group to try to make a symmetry breaker, the randomization is already accounting for that prior to birth. That's the point of the Mendelian randomization study.
All right, I'd have to look at those, but the point that what I feel like it could be, and again, like I haven't looked at these particular Mendelian studies that you're talking about, but it seems to me that there are so many things within that diet that can be damaging arteries that I still feel like it could be lost in noise. And you can,
totally fine. I don't have a problem with saying that. I just have a problem with saying that it's TMAO. I'm not denying that there are things within animal products that damage arteries. I agree with that. I think. And so
my question is, how have they appropriately separated TMAO from animal products when they're?
Yeah. So I'll answer. So one example is that a Mendelian randomization study has been done on certain products that are in animal products that for example, saturated fat and LDL cholesterol. So for example, LDL cholesterol and saturated fat is in animal products as well as TMAO. And Mendelian randomization studies have been done on both LDL cholesterol and TMAO. And in the case of LDL cholesterol, the Mendelian randomization studies are very clear that those who have the single nucleotide polymorphisms that predict the higher levels of LDL do, in fact, get worse cardiovascular disease outcomes. And those who have the biologically predicted higher levels of TMAO from the single nucleotide polymorphisms do not end up having worse cardiovascular disease outcome.
Okay, now can we get
so that's how I would separate. That's the answer to your question, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I want to get to my official view on TMAO is that I believe that it's a very likely culprit to be a contributor, but I do also believe that it is dwarfed by things like saturated fat.
Okay, I would just need to see the data on what basis and where it stands in the evidence hierarchy, why it's very likely to be a contributor, not a confounder. Because the whole point of a Mendelian randomization study is precisely to separate a contributor from a confounder. That's the whole reason why the Mendelian randomization study was done, because they didn't know if TMAO was a confounder or a contributor. They had prospective cohort studies, and what they found in the prospective cohort study was there was a statistically significant difference when you had TMAO levels above 6 point something I forget if it was micromoles per liter, I think that's what it was last I looked at it, but under 6 point something micromoles per liter, under that concentration, TMAO didn't seem to matter. There was no association between that and heart disease. But above that association there was, and about 85% of omnivores had lower than that, and about 15% of omnivores had TMAO levels that were actually a problem if that association was causal.
Yeah. So I still want to back up to this. So we have, again, can you explain to me why you actually think that raising platelet aggregation in a vegan population wouldn't be harmful? Because platelet, because raising platelet aggregation doesn't necessarily entail cardiovascular disease. But when you are, like, for example, let's say you have some vegans that end up getting high cholesterol for various reasons. Maybe they're eating a lot of coconut oil, they're eating a lot of high saturated fat from other things. You still feel like, they'll probably be just fine with higher platelet aggregation as well as that. Like, even if there are multiple.
So the answer is it depends on the degree of platelet aggregation. So that's one. You'd have to look at to what degree it is and what degree is actually terminating outcomes. See, this is why it's always important to terminate. Whenever you have a mechanistic study that results, whether it's platelet aggregation or endothelial functionality, you need to correlate that with what degree does that predict an outcome. To what degree of platelet? Because other than that, it's very, very speculative and very it's what there's a pejorative term that's used a lot in this survey called, and I actually coined it, unfortunately. It's called mechanistic speculation. So the issue is, what you would have to do is you would have to see what degree of platelet aggregation is being increased and what degree of cardiovascular diseases that actually predict among these people who have this degree of cholesterol. So in a lot of cases, there's very varying degrees of platelet aggregation, and in most cases, it's not. There's a normal variability. The first thing you would have to see is this increase, is it out of the norm? That's the first thing. So is it first? Well,
normal is standard American population could still.
Hold on. By normal,
within the norm of vegans.
Within the norm, the way you can define it within the norm of vegans, we could define it within the norm. Really, the way it should be defined is within the norm of what it would not be associated with a health outcome. This is why I always go back to terminating health outcomes. I don't really consider mechanistic data to be that useful if it's not linked to an accounting of a health outcome, because then it's just purely speculative. Because if we say that this platelet aggregation increased by 5%, now increasing platelet aggregation by 5% in various populations, what does that end up doing? It could end up doing nothing. It could end up causing ischemic heart disease. It could end up, and you may be completely surprised and find out, like, contrary to everything we know about it, it ends up reducing ischemic heart disease. You have no idea. But if we were able to terminate it in an outcome and say, okay, it predicts this amount, and this is out of the normal, and it turns out like 5% actually makes no difference at all. You actually have to get to 50% or 55%, and then you start seeing a difference in ischemic heart disease. Then that's useful information, because that tells you that if this increases platelet aggregation and it makes you go from 5% to 10%, it actually doesn't do anything at all. Versus if it made you go from 5% to 60%. then that's useful information. So the answer to your question is, it all depends on what degree it is, and it depends on the other contextual factors that relate to platelet aggregation. But if someone just shows that this increases platelet aggregation, and then there's other data showing that, well, apparently this does increase platelet aggregation, but apparently it didn't end up resulting in any difference. Because I'm going to go with the data that terminated in the outcome. The data that terminated in the outcome are the Mendelian randomization studies, which ended up showing that despite the fact that TMAO may result in increased platelet aggregation, it actually didn't change anything in terms of cardiovascular disease.
In a population that's like 98% not.
Sure, which by the way is the population you want to study, and I'll tell you why. Yeah. Because the vegan population you would actually expect the problem to be in that population, not the vegan population.
So we see about it's about a 10%
hold on. Let me finish. And I'll let you. Just to be clear, 10% rise in what?
10% rise in platelet aggregation percentage of max
amplitude. And so what I would need to, so then just, I'll go back to the point, but just I don't want to get off topic, but what I would need to see is what does that correlate to in an outcome?
Maybe even 15.
Yeah. So what does that correlate to an outcome? Because I'm not impressed by 10 to 15% of platelet aggregation increase at all. Like I wouldn't look at that and be like,
that puts.
Oh, that's.
I could be right, but that puts your vegan high as your omnivore.
Wait, what?
1 second. It's I can't just between games.
But look, here's the main point. Here's the point I need to drive home. And I did get a little bit off track just now. The point is, you would expect the population you actually want to study, if you want to expect a difference in health outcome, is actually not the vegan population for TMAO. It actually is the omnivore population. And the reason why is because there's only been an association for there's only been a statistically significant association for any health outcome. I'm almost positive I've read this study in full on the stream with Isaac.
Okay,
yeah, no, no, I don't think I have. No,
check it out.
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
I will check it out. But wait, let me just finish the point, Mike. The point is, you actually wouldn't expect the health outcome differences to be in the vegan population unless you're ridiculously increasing TMAO. You would actually expect, if you were going to do a study on a Mendelian randomization study, the appropriate subjects are omnivores to determine if TMAO causes heart disease. And the reason is because the association of TMAO and heart disease actually doesn't exist at vegan levels. It doesn't actually, within subjects of vegans that have the vegan range of TMAO, there's no statistically significant difference in heart disease within that range at all. You can increase it or decrease it within that range.
But this is greater than tenfold increase in plasma TMAO levels here.
Yeah, well, no. Listen, that doesn't. The tenfold is just tenfold increase is just a relative increase. That could very well be within a range that doesn't make any difference.
But so for example, puts a vegan.
Well, no, wait, hold on.
Area.
No, it does. No, doesn't necessarily, because if it's 0.1 and then it's a tenfold difference, you get a TMAO level of 1. And that.
But if you look at the charts, you can see that they come into the same range of TMAO when vegans are given.
Wait. I'm not talking about. No, hold on. I'm not talking about. You said a tenfold increase of TMAO, and you said.
I just read the last quote before we started playing the game.
All I'm saying is that if you were going to expect a difference if you were going to examine an outcome difference from a tenfold increase in TMAO, based on the available data we have, that would be it would seem to be more pronounced in omnivores than vegans. You would actually still want to study the omnivores, and here's why. Because at the levels that vegans have, there's vegans that have 0.1. There's vegans that have 0.3. If you increase, there's a vegan who has a 0.3, increase it tenfold, you get 3. That actually is not even, that difference isn't going to result in any statistically significant difference in association with that tenfold difference. Now, if you talk about an omnivore, that absolutely would. An omnivore would be pushed, almost every omnivore a tenfold increase would be pushed from an area that's been not associated with a statistically significant increase in risk of cardiovascular disease. An omnivore, a tenfold increase is much more likely to push them into that risk range than a vegan would be.
So you're saying TMAO does increase risk?
No. I'm not. I'm saying no. What I'm saying is that the association study, where TMAO, the levels at which TMAO is associated with cardiovascular disease, don't become statistically significant until 6 point something micromolars per liter. And so because of, and what I'm also saying is that vegans have very, very low levels of TMAO. So a 10-fold increase in TMAO, if you start from 0.3 and go to 3, you wouldn't even if that was causal, you wouldn't actually expect to pick it up in the Mendelian randomization study. You wouldn't actually expect to pick anything up, even if the TMAO was causal, if you were to run it on vegans. But if you were to run it on omnivores and the effect was causal, you would actually expect to see it. So the same 10-fold increase would actually result in a, if it was causal, if it is true that it would cause cardiovascular disease, the same 10-fold increase, you would see that increased risk in cardiovascular disease more likely in an omnivore than a vegan.
Yeah, sorry, I have to stop talking now.
Okay.
But it's good to talk to you. I still feel like I think it's worth taking a cautious anti-supplement. I just talked to Joel Kahn today, and he's
he's crazy. He's fucking crazy. I think he's nuts. He's complete. He saw this study. He saw this Mendelian randomization study on TMAO. I know he's the TMAO guy. I spoke to Joel Kahn too. I know he's the TMAO guy. He saw the study. I know he saw the study because on Facebook I saw he commented on the study. And it was nonsense what he commented. It was just like he just went off about him the same points. Like I couldn't take it. Like he just rejected it. Oh, it's just one study. Like TMAO is his baby, and he's just committed to it. He's just straight up committed to it.
My point was that he was saying that if TMAO levels in vegans that take choline go above a certain level, then they should stop taking. I just feel like it's still worth it to be cautious of TMAO. There's no advantage of being oh, let's just not worry about TMAO. Sure, vegans should feel fine.
I don't think there's any reason. I don't think there's any. Well, look, anything at the point of slamming it too high. No, if you get over. Well, hold on. Here's what I've said. If you get over a certain point, there is an association. Not if you get over it, but there's association with people who have a TMAO level above a certain point in cardiovascular disease. Now, the question is that an association a confounder or is it causal? Now, if you want to do a study to detect if it was a confounder or causal, you would want to look at people who have you'd want to do a Mendelian randomization study among people who have different levels of this TMAO. And you would want that range. The best place to start would be to have that range go above and below the area which there's the statistically significant association. Now, and the best way to do that is to do the study on omnivores, not vegans, is what I'm saying.
Just really quickly, this is probably the last thing I can say, but I'm not sure exactly what I have to compare the units at another time, but I'm seeing millimoles or whatever, or micromoles or something. Up around starts at 2, goes to 17. And I think
and where does it become statistically? Is this the New England?
Did you just
Journal?
say it was at 6?
No, 6 is where it becomes. 6 is where 6 points. I don't know if it's I'll have to check the units. It was. Let me check it. Here it's in. I have it. I have it in my arm.
Okay, well that's the last thing I can say. But
wait, what was the last thing?
I'm saying that's the last point I can make.
No, what was the point? I missed the point.
Oh, I was just saying that I wouldn't say for sure that these vegans who have these supplemented levels are below that.
No, what were the levels? You mentioned levels.
Just look in the study the last study I linked in general.
Okay.
17. I'd have to look at it more. It could be low. Could be not low. I'm multitasking beyond multitasking right now. Okay,
where's the study? Okay, there we go. Okay. I want to read this. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we should talk about it. It's if TMAO is one avenue of risk, I'm not going to ignore it. But if it isn't, then I have no problem being I wasn't talking about TMAO at all a couple months ago. I'm not super invested in it, but I still think if it is something that's worth talking about. Anyway, good to talk to you. And
all right, thanks for talking. Yeah, we'll talk. Right. I'll DM you the Mendelian randomization study.
Okay, sounds good. I'll read it.
Okay.
All right. Good night, man.
All right, good night.
Bye.